Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another CyberPatriot meeting. I hope you're enjoying your summer. And today I'm going to go over a little bit more in-depth explanation of some of the things that you can do to prepare not only for CyberPatriot, but just your cybersecurity background in general. And so if you went to one of the camps that I mentioned last time, great. If you have not, that's okay. You can still go through some nice preparation following the agenda that I will share today. And so the agenda of this video is going to go over four main things. Number one are bash scripts. Number two, bash scripts. Number three, Python scripts. Number four, overview of the Linux and Windows distributions I have now, although we'll see that it can be up to change if anyone wants to. And so before I go a little bit more in depth on the bash scripts, let me just explain what a script is in the first place. And so a script is going to sound a lot more complicated than it actually is. You can compare a command script to a movie script. It's just a list of lines that you have beforehand that you will say later on. Similar to a movie script, a computer script is simply just a list of commands that you've pre-written so that you don't have to write it every single time you want a certain function to happen. As you will see in the many examples that I will show today, even something as simple as visiting 10 websites. Instead of searching the website up every single time, you can just click on a single file and it'll do it for you. And so it can go as simple as that to scripts that rely on other scripts, and it can go into hierarchies, etc. But for now, we'll just focus on simple commands that we can not only apply to CyberPatriot, but ultimately other uses as well. And so specifically for bash scripts, this is pretty Windows specific. So if you're in Windows, this is the type of scripting that you'll be working with. And so bash scripts are just simple text files that contain command prompt commands. It's as simple as that. The only difference between, as you'll see, between the different types of scripts is what they're saved as. So a bash script is saved with the .bat extension. If you do not save it as a .bat extension, then it won't be able to run as a bash script, and that will be a problem because you would have written all that code just to have one small mistake, just not saving it right. So if you are to save it, make sure it's .bat, and you'll see that in the example. And so ultimately, you will run these codes through the command prompt. What is the command prompt? I may have mentioned this a few times, but it's just basically the communication between you, the user, the operating system, and the operating system is your communication to the internal aspects of your computer. And so in this way, the command prompt is the guide and the tunnel that you will speak with the operating system. And that's what's so interesting about programming language is that you can communicate with your computer without necessarily speaking the same language as the internal of the computer in storing it in binary, etc. And so basically, you can run basic commands such as opening a file, visiting a website, turning on a firewall, running audits, etc. All the things that we've seen in the CyberPatriot competition, we can apply to scripting. And so this is the main reason why I wanted to introduce this is scripting will allow us to automate the many things that we were doing in the CyberPatriot competition. So instead of turning on or off the firewall every single competition, every single image, all we would have to do is run this script and it'll do it for us. Just as a disclaimer, CyberPatriot scripts are allowed in the competition until the national level. And so hopefully, as we move on, we will continue to use scripts at least until the national level. But ultimately, we will be using scripts just to automate simple tasks that possibly can save us 1 or 2 hours, maybe even 3, depending on how much we write in these scripts. Ultimately, the final goal would be to take all of the information that we were able to come up with last year on the firewall cheat sheet below and to turn that into some sort of script so that, again, while we are doing work, while we were searching for things that are not on the cheat sheet, it'll be automatically getting points for us in the background. So we'll be running the script that we will be building. And so my challenge to you is after you see this example, after you've looked at some of the resources below, is to simply try it yourself. I'm not asking for a complicated script, even just simple script to turn off the firewall or deleting a user or even visiting a website. That's a great start. And ultimately, the start is the hardest part. And so that's my challenge to you if you're in Windows and you're looking forward to bash scripts. And so like I said, the end goal is to do the Windows cheat sheet. So now I will go over some of the resources that I have, and then I'll go through an example. And so I've listed the firewall cheat sheet. This is the one that we created last year with the various amount of sources. And then basically, I have some user account manipulation. So if you've already done visiting websites, if you've already done like simple turning on the firewall, and you're interested in manipulating users, I made sure to put a link. Basic command overview from Princeton Computer Science is a good overview. Just how the command prompt works, some of the basic commands. Same thing with the tutorials point. I do like that one a little better as it provides a little clearer picture. So if you are just interested in the basic overview, that's a good place to start. There's also the CyberPatriot Bash scripting overview. I'd recommend this one after you go over a little bit of the other resources. It's not necessarily an advanced level, but it kind of is a little bit more CyberPatriot specific. So having a little bit of background would help. And then finally, there's a YouTube series tutorial that I have in the link. I believe it's 6 or 7 parts of just step-by-step walking through the bash script. It isn't perfect, but it'll provide a good overview. If you go through that tutorial, you should have the knowledge needed to not only go out to the other videos, but hopefully start writing your own scripts. And so now I will write a batch script for you all live. And so let me unshare here and let me share the screen total. Okay, so basically the first step you'll need to do is to right click. If you're on Windows, of course. If you're not on Windows, then you won't be able to do this. You could still technically write the scripts, but you won't be able to run the Windows scripts, at least for now. I'll see if I can find a resource for the command prompt and add it to the slides a little later. And so we're going to right click, and then you'll see new. You'll hover over new, and you'll go to text document. Because ultimately, these scripts are just text documents. And so you'll open this up, and you'll get a simple notepad. And so I'm just going to do something really simple, such as opening a website. So basically, that command is start, and then you would just paste the website in. We can really choose the website. Cyber Skyline. We'll do the CyberPatriot website as a start. So we can capture this link and put it here, and then we'll do one more just to kind of prove the point. So let's visit Great Oak High School, and then visit that website as well. Copy paste that, and so we can add it here. Start. Okay, so now that we have this, we can save it. So right now you would go to File and then Save As. And so this is the important part. Like I was saying, make sure you save it as .bat. And so basically for now, we can name it example.bat. And save it. It should save. I just see I want to run one before. Okay, so the example one is here. That's when I was creating it earlier. So let's see what happens when we double click on this example. It opens both of the websites at the same time. And although you're probably pretty amazed right now, there are a ton more capabilities between this. You might have seen the black box come up. It'll automatically run the script if you double click on it. That's also nice about the Windows. And the Linux, you'll actually have to run some commands in order to run it. With Windows, you can just simply double click. It does take longer if the longer the scripts are. I mean, that intuitively makes sense. So just be prepared if you're writing really, really advanced scripts that it will take an extensive amount of time depending on what tasks you are doing. And so now, after the Windows, I'll be moving on to Bash scripts. Basically, Bash scripts are the same exact thing as Bash scripts. It's just in Linux. Or Linux isn't the right word for it, but basically it's the language that can communicate with Linux and a bunch of the other distributions of Linux, such as Ubuntu or Debian, which we will be using in the competition. And so basically, it's the same concept. You'll be using a text file, and then you will write your commands pre-written, except this time you'll be saving under .sh. I believe that stands for shell. I could be mistaken, but ultimately you're just saving it in a .sh file. And instead of the command prompt, like in Windows, we'll be running it through the terminal. And you'll see in the images throughout the year, it's called the terminal instead of the command prompt. It's a very slight difference. If you think of it as the same thing, if you're on Linux or Windows, it pretty much serves the same function. Hopefully too many people don't get mad at me at that. I just think it's the same function. And yeah, so we run the scripts through there. And so basically when you run a Bash script or any type of script, what you're doing is you're running an instance of a program, which is called a process. So if you hear that terminology for me or another person, that's what it means. And then finally, one last terminology thing is when you're running a Bash script, you are also executing the script. Again, just to make sure that if I say that throughout the year, you know what that means. All that means is just simply just running the script that you've written. And so basically the difference between the Linux and the Windows is in the Linux, it's a little bit more tedious. It's not too much more tedious, but it's a little bit more tedious. So for example, when running a bash script, you typically want to start with I may be mispronouncing this, but a shebang, which is basically, it changes the directory so where it can run a bash script. And so if you don't use the shebang, you assume that the user is currently in an atmosphere that can run a bash script, which can cause problems later down the road. So you typically want to start your script with the hashtag !bin/bash, and just as a starting point so you can guarantee that your bash script will run. Your other option is to use the command bash. It's just kind of tedious if you have multiple scripts to run. At the beginning, it won't be, just because we'll have 1 or 2 max, but over time we'll have 5, 6, 7, depending on how complicated our scripts become. And so eventually we hopefully will translate towards the shebang versus the bash command. But for now, you're more than welcome to use the bash command. Again, for the resources, I've attached the Ubuntu cheat sheet that we've created from multiple resources last year. In a couple Linux resources, I've mentioned this site again and again, but Linux Journey is a great place to start. In terms of bash scripting, it's just a simple website that kind of go overviews. The only thing that is a little disappointing that it doesn't have an atmosphere for you to run it. And so I've included below a tutorial for how to get a Linux virtual machine if you're on Windows. Because I don't think anyone uses Linux in the club, but if you do have Windows, you can install a Linux virtual machine so you can execute and see these commands. And so if you're going through Linux Journey, it's a lot more meaningful because you're actually seeing what the commands do. And that's pretty important, because if you're just learning the command, it's no different than memorizing flashcards. And really, in my opinion, learning computer programming is best when it's done with examples. And so the other tutorial I gave is Ryan's tutorials. It's very similar, except that it does provide a place for you to run commands. So if you try the virtual machine, it just does not work, you can try the Ryan's tutorials, and it does have an environment for you to run the commands, so you can still get a basic overview of the bash scripting. And then I've also included a page to change the users, just to kind of bring you into the possibilities within CyberPatriot. And the class that I highly recommend is a YouTube course. It's about 3.5 hours, but after those 3.5 hours, you're going to be very, very, very familiar, at least at the start, to do the bash scripting, especially when we enter the year. So if anything, you can watch that video. And although it is 3.5 hours, if you just split it into 6, 7, until now, really, if you spend, I think, 10 minutes per day, you will fly past that video to the start of the school year, and it'll just be a good overview. If not, that's okay. You can just look at some of the resources, but if you're on Linux, that's what I highly recommend. And so the final script that I have is the Python script. Also, I forgot to go to the example. Basically, because I don't have the Linux virtual machine or this Python that I'm about to mention right now, I have examples of what a script may look like, but I may not be able to run them live for you. But again, if you have any questions about that, just let me know, and I will pretty soon get the virtual machine and download the Python 3, just so that if you need, I can run scripts for you, or I can help just kind of guide you along that process. So moving on, the final type of script that we'll be using is a Python script. And so we've introduced bash scripts. Why would we use a Python script? And basically, there are a couple of reasons to do so. Number one is that it can work on both Windows and Linux. So if you are somebody who are going to be working on Windows and Linux, then Python might be for you, because it will work on both. I'm not too sure about the specifics, but I'm pretty sure that it's very similar between a Windows and a Linux script. The next thing is that Python is much, much, much easier to read, in my opinion, than Bash or Bash script. You can kind of follow along the process and have an idea of what's happening. The other ones, it takes a little bit more, like if you write the program, you'll understand it, but as an outside reader, it's definitely a little harder to read it compared to a Python script or program. And also, if you learn Python, there are a billion things that you can do with Python. One of them, you can do just build simple tasks that you'll use in your computer science classes, or even something like machine learning. Really, Python is a very useful language. And ultimately, if you want to get something out of it besides the Bash and Bash scripting, Python is a great place, because once you learn Python, you open up many opportunities for yourself. And so I'd recommend this one as well. The only drawback is that it's very limited in its ability compared to Bash script. Very maybe an exaggeration, but it is more limited just because you're not. That's not the language that directly communicates with your operating system. It's kind of like a new import that you'll have to use, kind of like an indirect communication. So it's definitely has more limitations, but again, there are benefits to it. So if you're interested, I decided might as well put this in here as well. And so the first thing you'll have to do for both of these is download Python 3. And so originally when I first saw Python 3, I'm like, what in the world is Python 3? Python 3 just means version 3 of Python. And so if you see Python 2 or Python 3, it's just a version. So it's not, of course it is different, but they kind of all had the same premise. So don't panic too much about that. And as mentioned before, this one is saved differently. It's that as .py file. It stands for Python. It's pretty straightforward. And that's the extension that you have to save it as in order to be able to run it as a Python script. And kind of similar to the Bash, in order to run it, you'll use the Python in the script name. You'll see in the videos a little bit more clear. And since I'm kind of disappointed I won't be able to show you live, but very simply, it's just the Python command. And then ultimately, you can try it on both the Windows or the Ubuntu cheat sheet. Doesn't matter. If you know the Python's the one for you, you can just try either one and kind of extend as you go. And so the resource that I provide are some Python download instructions for Windows, as well as the Python download for Windows/Linux. So if you're on either one, you can download it just fine and be able to start your scripting. The next thing I've done is include a Python basic learning source. So if you have no idea what Python is, you have never touched Python or any type of programming language, this is a good place to start. It's free. It's a very simple resource for you to use as a starting point. The only complaint that I have about it is that it does have small advertisements here and there. It's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of a nuisance, but ultimately it's a good starting point. I guess that's what it takes to be free. And the next one I've introduced is the Python Advanced Learning Source. I've used DataCamp to learn Python. It's a very good source. I've been through some of the classes. It's very extensive. However, it does cost a little money because you have to buy a membership to DataCamp. And so if you want to take that extra step, if you want to go advanced in Python and on DataCamp, not to sound like an advertisement, but there isn't just things that you can learn for Python scripting, for CyberPatriot, but there's also many other things that you can learn, including either machine learning algorithms or data analytics. You have a ton of options on DataCamp if you want to. For Python, I believe you can learn R there as well. And so you have a ton of options if you're interested. And the final thing is I have a basic video on running a Python script on the command prompt. And so if you can't figure out how to do it, it's okay. Just watch the video just to get a basic overview on that. So that ultimately when you come in October, when the club starts, everyone kind of has an idea of what I'm talking about when I say script. And so the final thing I'll go over, and then I'll show the rest of the examples. It's just a simple thing that I had last time. So I just want to emphasize that our goal is to have some platinum teams so that hopefully some of us can qualify for the 2,500 scholarship opportunity. Basically, if we get platinum, our team automatically qualifies. Everyone on the team qualifies for this scholarship opportunity. So, I don't think a lot of people mind $2,500. Of course, we're doing it for our love for cybersecurity, but that's just an extra benefit to get platinum. And so right now I have for Linux, myself, Alex, Josh, Isaac, and Lauren. If for whatever reason I added you and you're not supposed to be there, just let me know. I can switch you to Windows. And if you're in Windows and you want to be in Linux, etc., I'll switch it. But this is just what I have right now. And then for Windows, it's David, Tristan, Hazel, Brandon, and Bradley. And so those are the people that I have in their respective categories. Of course, if you have a problem with your assignment, just let me know. Or if I somehow miss your name, just let me know and I can add it on. And so the final thing that I'll do is show you a little bit of what a Python script could look like. So let me share my screen once more. Okay, and so the Python script that I have here, and so it's not too extensive, obviously. I just kind of wanted to show a little bit of the different syntax. So it's just a print command. You'll see in the bash script that it's echo. Ultimately, what I want to show through this is that in each language, there are just different ways to do the same thing. So if you ever encounter a new language, it's okay. It probably does the same stuff as your own language, but ultimately, would be what a Python script looks like. you can extend the script into more complicated functions, but that's just a simple print, hello world. And if you're running it, you would get an output that literally just says, hello world. Your most basic program that you can get. And then finally, and notice how I save it as the .py. And the final thing is the bash script, and this is just echo, same thing as print, right? It'll just say, hello world. Nothing revolutionary. Probably not going to help us with the CyberPatriot competition, but it's a great start for anyone who really has never done any scripting or even programming before, and this is just a great place to start. And so that pretty much ends my presentation here. And so the last thing I want to do is just kind of overview kind of the plans. Over the rest of the summer, I will try my best to provide more resources or provide more resources if there's any. And if you have any extension, if you have any questions, or if you just fly through what I have on the slides here and you want more, let me know and I can give you more. Or if you have any questions about either running a print or running another command, just let me know and I'm more than happy to help out. I will try to respond as soon as possible. I may have another meeting like this, just pre-recorded, maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3, before we start the club. It'd be nice if you watch it, but if not, I completely understand. If you just prepare like this for the rest of the summer, you'll be prepared for the CyberPatriot competition when we start preparing specifically for the competition itself in October, September-ish, whenever the club may start. And so that pretty much ends it. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. The next video should be released in 3 weeks or so. And if I see, if there are tons of questions about a specific thing that I get, I can post a video sooner, just kind of going over those questions. I may also have 1 or 2 sessions where I'm just sitting in a Google Meet for 30 minutes and anyone could come in and ask any questions. We'll see. It just depends how many questions I get or, etc. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you either in the next video or at school during a CyberPatriot meeting. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. Thank you and have a great day, CyberPatriots.